working with between corporates and startup. And now I'm actually transitioning back to where I come from, meaning some venture capital and private equity background in my past. So I'm taking over the portfolio. Happy to meet you all today, and I'm sure we will see more often in the future. Rodrigo.
Super. Well, nice to see you all again. I'm also seeing new faces that I haven't met, like from previous cohorts from when I just started bootcamp. So nice to meet you all. I'm also, well, I'm part of the relations unit, startup growth, of course. But in this part, I'm also, well, together with Zoe, planning the founders lounge, etc. So happy to see you again.
Cool. Thank you very much, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us anytime. I think all of you have our contact, you know how to reach us, but happy to also put our LinkedIn's in the chat as we're going on with the session. But I know a lot of you have the cameras on already. I can also see that some have not quite yet. So please turn your cameras on just so we can see your face, so make it as engaging as possible. I think you all know the drill from our workshops and masterclasses. We always like to see everybody if we can. So unless you are in a situation where you cannot do that, then please turn on your camera. But today's Founders Lounge is on sales, an important topic, one that was heavily requested by a lot of you. So I'm very glad to see you all on the call. A lot of you guys that we spoke to recently that had questions. Hopefully this will answer it. So we're joined by Paul to talk about the greatest mistakes founders make when it comes to sales, when it comes to go to market. So without further ado, I will stop talking and I will hand the mic to the person that you all came here to listen to. So Paul, over to you. Thank you so much for joining. I will stop my screen and then I'll hand it all over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'll pull up the quick presentation I have for you guys. I'll say this before I begin. I just because we're talking about mistakes, I want to make sure that people in the audience here today don't take this as a founder bashing session. Quite the opposite. These are a collection. I've been coaching startups in sales and go-to-market for over 9 years. It'll be 10 years in November. I've been a founder myself twice. This is just a collection of the greatest hits of some of the mistakes I've seen founders make and I've made myself. So I want to make that abundantly clear. The reason why we're talking about mistakes is I tend to think, right, that if I can surface and make you guys aware of some of the greatest mistakes founders make when selling, you might be able to avoid them and avoid yourselves a lot of pain, heartache, costs, energy drains, whatever it is. And for the format of such a presentation, that can be the most beneficial thing, I think. So I never want you to think that this is founder bashing. Quite the opposite. I consider it a privilege to wake up every morning and help founders and startup operators put their dents in the universe. I just want you guys to know that. So without further ado, we'll be going over some of the top mistakes I've seen founders make and some of the ones I've made myself. There will be, after the talk, I'm happy to also intersperse questions during. I'll let Zoe moderate that and send them through if and when they're appropriate. But there should be time after the talk too for questions. So feel free to either ask them or save those. I love the interactive nature of of such a talk, and I want to make sure to address some of the specific questions you guys may have. So let me get started. I'm going to share my screen. Well, more than share my screen, I'll put this in presentation mode. If you give me one sec. Hopefully you guys can see it. First things first, right? This is one of the biggest ones that I see founders make constantly, and it is incredibly costly. And it's costly because if you make the mistake of delegating sales too early and it doesn't work out, you end up with a sales reboot, right? And here's what I mean by that. I'll give you an example, just an example. We helped a company, there's a YC company we helped a while back, several years ago, as they were starting their batch. It was a summer batch. And the two founders at the time were really worried about product market fit. And they came to me and they were like, hey, listen, we're not even sure we've built the right product. We're not even sure we're targeting our go-to-market to the right vertical. What should we do? And I told him, hey, listen, product market fit is a function of both product and sales and go-to-market execution. Let's level you guys up when it comes to sales and go-to-market executions. That's generally what I can help with. Product, I can help in very minimal ways, but sales and go-to-market, I can, and let's see what happens. And so we ended up working with this company. 3 months later, as they were getting out of YC, they had 50x their ARR and were able to raise a large seed round. A year later, after working with them, they started at $4,000 in ARR, right? They were barely anything. A year later, they were at 1 mil, and 2 years in, they were at 3 mil. So we felt very good about their chances at the time. And they did too. And their VCs started putting pressure on them. Hey, you've got to put this capital to work, build a sales team, et cetera. And I said, hey, listen, if it were me, I would go very slowly. I might hire 1 rep, maybe 2 at most, but we've got to take this is a very treacherous transition from founder-led sales to salesperson-led sales. They ended up taking their VC's advice. They hired a sales team of 3 or 4 reps, 1 sales ops person, 1 VP of sales on top of that. And their revenue trajectory basically went flat, right? They barely closed any deals for about 9 months. Very costly, right, for them, because 9 months later, they let go of everybody except for 1 rep who's still with the company today. They are now at 5 mil in ARR. They're profitable. Their runway is basically infinite, right? Because their default's alive, but they still haven't made. We're still working on making that transition from founder-led sales to salesperson-led sales, because that 1 rep still isn't reaching quota, right? And isn't paying for himself. And so my advice to you guys for this is not to delegate sales too early. Make sure you have 2 conditions that are filled before you even consider hiring for sales. One is a repeatable sales process, right? That's in place. And what does repeatability mean? Well, it means that if you put X number of leads at the top of your funnel, you will get Y revenue. And that if you put 2X, you will get 2Y, right? Your conversion rates stay the same. So that's one of the more important conditions you're going to have. And 2, you're going to want this sales process to be documented in a sales playbook that you can then hand over to new reps you're going to be hiring, right? That path to revenue needs to be documented so that folks can know exactly what to do and what to execute on when you do hire them, right? So be careful of what advice you take, whether it's advisors, VCs, et cetera. Yes, they're going to want you to grow fast, but this transition from founder-led sales to salesperson-led sales needs a lot of attention. And you need those 2 conditions I just talked about filled before you even consider hiring for sales. Okay, this is a big one, right? And we can all fall prey to it as startup founders. It feels good to stay in that warm cocoon. It feels good to get intros to potential customers from our investors. It feels good to get intros to other portfolio companies, to batchmates. All that feels amazing. And it's easy to talk to friendlies, right? And sometimes it can enable you to get some early revenue. But there are very big downsides to this, right? One of which is that pitching friendlies, selling to friendlies, is going to give you false signals, right? People won't give you the blunt feedback you actually need. As a founder, you shouldn't try to protect yourself from outside harsh feedback. You should be trying to welcome it, because that's what the market is telling you, right? And you need to be able to really take in that market feedback and learn from it over time. You should be wanting to learn from the market at every market interaction, every interaction you have with it. And so be careful of the false positives you might get with friendlies. The other thing that I see, and that's a real danger about over-relying selling into your networks, is that generally founders will put off building a go-to-market motion that enables them to get in front of potential customers in a scalable way. So you might be able to get a little bit of revenue by selling to your batchmates, by selling to potential portfolio cos, But what ends up happening is once your network is depleted, and anybody's network gets depleted by definition because they're finite, you end up having your revenue flatten out for a long time until you find message market fit, right? The ability to put a message into the market that gets replied to with interest until you can actually grow your revenue. And finding message market fit can take 6, 9, 12 months. I don't want you to plateau for these 6, 9, 12 months. I want you to start working on that go-to-market motion in conjunction, right? Concurrently as you're having these conversations with these friendlies. So take a big bite out of that low-hanging fruit, right? Go ahead and get those intros if you want them, but don't ignore putting together a real go-to-market that's going to get you in front of customers in a scalable way. It's a real danger for you to do that, and I'm here to warn you about it. This is a big one, right? And this is one that when founders come to me and complain about their close rates, one of the first places I look at is not how they demoed their products or how they communicate their value props. One of the first places I look at is how they qualified. Is their qualification process sturdy enough? Because what it can end up happening is that if your qualification isn't sturdy enough, you might be letting through leads into your pipeline. They might become opportunities in your pipeline while they were not qualified, which at the end of the day ends up diluting your close rate, right? You have a bunch of opportunities in your pipeline that really didn't belong there, right? Those folks didn't belong as qualified opportunities in your pipeline, and they were not going to close in short order, or their probability of closing was actually really low. And so qualification, as you guys may already know, the reason we qualify salespeople is because a salesperson's most important resource is their time. I would venture to say the same about human beings in general. And what we want to do as salespeople is focus our time and attention on deals that have a high likelihood of closing in short order, right? And this is why qualification is so important. And we want to qualify for things like timing, urgency, budget, etc. I think somebody's not muted. Oh, there you go. And so qualification is an integral part of what you need to do as a founder. And it's really important to be able to, one, document your ideal customer profile with all its qualification criteria, and then ask the relevant questions that enable you to check off for those qualification criteria, whether they are hard qualifiers or soft qualifiers. More on that later if you guys are interested in that topic. Here's another one that is one of my favorites to talk about. Right. One of the things I want to say here is going to sound very blunt, and it might sound a little hurtful to founders. And I've been one myself, so I would know. Nobody cares about product features, right? You might as the founder because you built this thing, but outside of you, the market, your prospects, your customers, nobody wants more features. Nobody wants to buy more software in and of itself. What prospects really care is about what benefits them. Right? What are the high-level benefits of your product, or what pain you might be able to eradicate with your product or service? And so what I would want you to do is to focus on those things, right? How will you be eradicating the pain your prospect feels? What kind of benefits are they going to get from using your product? It's why one of the things that I do with my clients often when they show me their demos is I try to get them to tie every user flow or every product, or every feature or functionality they show during their demos back to value, right? Back to benefit to the prospect, him or herself. One of the things we can tend to do as founders is be so proud of our products that we will get excited about showing all the bells and whistles without necessarily having the prospect understand why it's beneficial to them, right? That's a real danger. Right? We got to be really, really careful not to lead with too much pride. I love that pride, by the way, right? It's one of the reasons I love helping founders and startup operators put their dents in the universe. I love the fact that people have put in so much craftsmanship, right, into building a product over 6, 9, 12, 18 months, right? Before they might even go to market. What what we need to do is be careful of this pride. We need to be very self-aware, right? And we need to make sure that we sell benefits, or we sell benefits, or we sell pain eradication above all else. This is a big one, right? And this ties back to one of the things we just talked about a little bit earlier. A lot of this work, go to market or top of funnel work, right? These activities will feel like grunt work, right? They will feel like eating glass, like putting things out on the market into the void without getting many replies, right? And at the beginning, that's totally normal. And a lot of people will get discouraged because they might not get enough dopamine to keep going. But I can't underscore how important this work is. And founders generally push off this kind of work either till the very last minute or till they have gotten every other thing they think they need to get done out of their day. And what I do with founders a lot is I get them to schedule block out times in their work days that is immutable, immovable, where they will be focusing in on those top of funnel and go-to-market activities.
Also, Paul, sorry to jump in halfway through, but somebody just put that they have a question about this slide, and if it's okay to ask this question now.
Of course.
So is it all right?
Let's do it.
So let's talk about top of funnel. If I had $1 every time I got an email saying, "Hey, yo, buy 10,000 leads or whatever," then I think that would just be my business. I wouldn't be selling tech into the oil and gas space. So what would you suggest as far as generating these top of funnel folks that's not a complete scam?
Well, what do you mean by a complete scam? I don't think sending an email sounds like a complete
No,
scam.
no, I'm saying I receive emails saying, hey, buy these 10,000 leads from us. And it's a very closed off industry. So how do you get these introductions? Because I think that we are going through kind of the first and second slide that you've mentioned, which is using Rolodexes versus actually generating our own funnel here.
Yeah, so it's fine to go through introductions, but know that there's some dangers to it, right? We mentioned them a little bit earlier in the talk. What I would do in concurrently to doing that is building out a real go-to-market, right? What message can I put out there? Or what channel should I be using? Or how can I reach out to my market and have it respond with interest? And I'd have to know more, right? What are your targets? Where do they hang out? Right? Do they hang out on LinkedIn? Do they process email all day, or at least a portion of the day? Do they pick up the phone when you call them? What kinds of experiments can you run that will prove or disprove certain things? Once you have a bunch of experiments that you have actually devised, we should be ranking them based on their likelihood of success, right? And that's one of the things I help my clients with, because the earlier we get experiments that are successful, the earlier we'll get to message market fit, which is incredibly important for startup survival. Right? So there's a lot of work that goes to go to market, and a lot of sophistication that needs to happen, a lot of data literacy, a lot of ability to read feedback that's coming back from the market, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And these are all skills that founders should build, right, over time. And if they don't do it, they're putting their startups in danger.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much. As a second. Perfect.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Hello. My question is related between both slides. So the previous one and this one is like, you said you don't need to sell features. And here you said don't invest, the founders don't invest early enough in the go-to-market. So to prepare the go-to-market during the early stage startup, for example. Maybe a lot of founders find challenges to convince their potential clients to sell their products, which is the product was mainly based on certain features. So the only thing that founder could convince, or let's say present his product, the power of the features. That's you need to show the power of the feature. But here, always we should have, or we need to have an early users. Mainly, a lot of people let's say give access to these early users or beta users for free. But here, how we can get benefit, or let's say that we can get profit from these early users.
So what's your
that helps us to adjust or learn how to sustain the our go-to-market strategy and beyond.
So your question is what exactly? You're saying, hey, should I it's hard for me to not sell features, but I would like to, like, what I'm trying to understand.
You said we as an early stage founder, let's say, don't invest early enough to go to market. But here, because it seems like it's not very profitable just to say, okay, let's finish the product first and then go to market with an effective product. So here it's like two phases. Let's say which one? Now. Yeah, okay.
I see what you're saying. And it's actually you're going to lead the horse to water. The horse being me, because
it's basically it's what coming first is the egg or the chicken. So
totally. And so great question. I encourage the founders I work with, right, to go to market before their products are ready. And I know that's going to sound wild, but there is no, I actually encourage founders to come to me before they even write one line of code, because I want them to engage with the market enough to where they can de-risk their startup greatly by figuring out if there's enough pain in the market. And here's what I mean by that, right? If you said, hey, listen, we think that CIOs have this issue, right? This daily pain that they deal with, right? And we want to help them eradicate this pain. Amy and I might say this, well, let's go talk to them, right? Let's not only talk to them and validate this pain and have them verbalize this pain and become acutely aware of it and confess it to us in emotionally negative language. But the best thing we might be able to do too, if the pain is that great, is to sign paid design partnerships with them without having written a line of code, right? Because if somebody is feeling pain in a great way, right? The pain is so intense, they might be willing to throw money at you to eradicate it. And to me, if you can get several of those signed, that's one of the greatest proof points you can ever have for your startup, right? To go out and start building that product to help eradicate that pain. So what I'd actually encourage founders to do is put your laptops down, right? Don't code for, you could even spend the first 3 to 6 months, de-risk your startup. Go find that pain that's really intense in the market and get design partnerships signed that are paid. Even if there's a money back guarantee, right? Hey, if we can't deliver this product by this particular date, you'll get your money back, right? But the strongest proof point I find at this particular stage is getting paid design partnerships without a product. Because the person's saying, hey, listen, if you could solve this thing, please, right? Here's money, right? And so it's one of the greatest proof. And that's why, when founders come to me and say, oh, I don't feel ready, I don't think my product, I'm like, let's still go to market, right? Let's figure out a way to get to market in a scalable way so you can talk to more people. And by talking to more people and having more market interactions, you'll get closer and closer to product market fit. There's nothing worse than building isolation in your product cave without having these interactions with the market. You should have a lot, even as you're building, to make sure that what you're building is heading in the right direction. Right? And so
yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
No problem. So my only point here is because it takes so long to find message market fit, right? You might as well start making some headway on it, even as you're building your product or even before you're building your product, so that you don't wait 6, 9, 12 months. Once you're ready with your products, you already know how to get in front of your customers in a scalable way. This is also one of my favorites because, and it's tied a little bit to what we were talking about or a little bit earlier with selling features over benefits and how that could be a mistake. There's something so cool about a founder, as I mentioned earlier, and their pride in their products. It's like their baby, right? And what founders typically want to do is they want to hold up their baby and say, "Isn't she cute?" to the rest of the world. And I love that. I don't want necessarily us to completely hide that pride because it can be really endearing. But what we need to do is to temper it a little bit, right? We should focus and really put ourselves in the prospect's shoes. One of the most important skills in sales is that empathy, right? Knowing what your prospect is going through on a day-to-day basis, knowing the contours of the problem, the shape of the problem, being really intimate with it, right? One of the things we say in sales is that if you can describe your prospect's problem, right, in very granular ways, in great detail, you then earn the right to pitch them. And typically, until you give them a sense of like, hey, I understand you. I understand what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. You don't necessarily have the right, you don't earn the right to pitch. And people will actually push you away and say, hey, listen, you don't really understand me, right? You don't understand me. I don't think you can help solve my problem. Only when you have that deep understanding of the problem, only when you know and you've put yourself in the prospect's shoes, do you earn the right to pitch in a lot of instances. And that comes with putting yourself in your prospect's shoes, right? What is keeping them awake at night, right? What is having them toss and turn about their work lives that you can help them with, right? You should be able to answer those and answer those in great detail. You need to get really intimately familiar with their issues and their problems on a day-to-day basis. This is a big one, right? And we don't talk about this one enough. Noor, did you have a question before I move on to this particular slide?
Yes, actually, thank you. Actually, my question is about the last sentence you said. So I need to answer their question. I need to give them the solutions for their pain points. But the thing is that sometimes we found ourselves with big competitors, like let's say Google or Microsoft or
Those are big. Those are big.
So
Yep.
here it depends. You said about the empathy part. So sometimes it depends on the personality of the salesperson or the founder itself, how they will operate with their clients. And sometimes we found ourselves like having this early adopter or even a potential client, and you don't want to lose them, but at the same point, you don't want to go down and deep into negotiating over like pizza money, you know? So that's really a question I would love to have an answer in, or your
Your question is what? That should I really take the time to know my prospects' problems?
no, is actually how to negotiate when it comes to me being um like being with another competitor that might be more, let's say, shiny for them. Like they will choose Microsoft over our system, for example, you know?
There's so many ways to talk about this, right? And we could talk, you and I could talk for, a couple hours just on this topic and how to negotiate against bigger companies. I'll give you a few thoughts, right? One is that, you may be able to compete on value, right? And I don't know what your product looks like compared to those other competitors. One of the things that people often say is that you don't get fired by choosing IBM, right? Or signing up with IBM or purchasing IBM. It may be the same thing for, the folks you're chatting with, because against these bigger entities, right, it may feel like a safer choice than going with us. Now, there's a bunch of stuff we can lead with. One of the things we could say is, hey, we're going to be way more responsive, way more nimble. You guys will help us build the future generations of our current product, and therefore have a lot, we'll get a lot closer to what you actually need, because you'll have a much bigger impact on our product roadmap, right, than you might with a Microsoft or a Google, right?
Yeah.
That's one way to look at it. You might also compete on price. You may say, hey, listen, we're going to be way cheaper than these other bigger companies, right? If
Yeah.
people are concerned about, hey, are you guys going to be around for a while? You're going to have to talk about the length of your runway, the fact that you've got investors with deep pockets, the fact that you're in a very stable position, if that's indeed the case. If people are afraid of for you, I'm not saying this is the case, but this happens for a lot of early stage startups. If they're concerned about, hey, what happens if we've adopted your software and you guys go out of business? Right? You may have a clause in the contract that says, hey, you guys can embargo an instance of our software and keep it forever, right? And that can be written in the contract. So there's a lot to look at when it comes to competing against bigger players. There are advantages we have as early stage startups, right, over these bigger players. And part of our job, the first things first, is adopting a mindset as to where we're not necessarily intimidated by competing in against these bigger players. I actually consider it an honor, right? If I'm an early stage startup and I'm being compared to a Microsoft or a Google, I consider it an honor, right? I'm playing in the big leagues. And then it's our job to figure out what's most important, for our prospects, and cater to those needs or those pain points.
What we've found successful as well, Nor, is that we do so we predict oil and gas pipeline leaks before they happen, and we charge by the mile. So we do shorter segments of pipeline just to show off every feature of our product. That way they can see that we're better than, obviously we're not competing with a Microsoft or a Google, but the equivalent thereof within my sector. So try to find a way to make a smaller sale. That way you're not affecting somebody's bonus necessarily. If they, as Paul was saying, nobody gets fired for picking IBM, Microsoft, Google, especially in the oil and gas industry or any sector in the energy industry where it's so conservative and everybody's worried about that lucrative bonus.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Delma?
Hi, thanks, Paul. I have a question regarding kind of ideal customer profile and sales cycle. So prior to, I guess, launching our current startup, I was in software sales and from a technical perspective, and I was a technical person on these calls. And what would often happen was I would be brought into the call on the third or on the second or third call with this client to convince them on the technicalities of the tool versus just kind of the, let's say, the overarching value. And ironically, we're facing that currently at our startup where we get on the call. For example, a few days ago, we got on a call with a potential client, and they were very interested in our kind of top value. But then they kind of deferred to someone else in their team, like, oh, I have to talk to, our technical expert that is going to be in charge of the HVAC installation, blah, 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 blah. So like some other engineer in their department. So what would you say is the best, maybe strategy or perhaps actually modeling a go-to-market approach where either we're able to skip that if we can, obviously we want to get the sales quick as possible, or building it into our sales kind of funnel?
Delma, it sounds to me, have you obtained the buyer journey?
Uh, have I obtained, is this a book? Sorry.
No. Have you garnered the buyer journey?
Oh,
It sounds to me,
yes.
it sounds to me like you might not have, right?
So the issue is we have, or it's not an issue, but it's a challenge. We have two buyer journeys, right? We're a marketplace. So on the one side, we have climate technologies, and on the other side, we have more established real estate developers and funds looking to kind of match to the climate technologies. So to your point, from a buyer journey perspective, the climate technologies are diverse, right? So there's size that we look into, there's region, location, and so I think what we probably don't have as of yet, so to your point, is maybe identify kind of segments of our buyer journey, or prototype, or like profiles, I think is a better word. So let's say the European market of our profile is different than the US market or the Middle East market. Um, yeah.
So it sounds to me, and what I mean by obtaining the buyer journey is you should plainly ask early on in your sales process, in your first call or meeting, how do you guys typically buy a solution like ours? Right? Because you should get all stakeholders' steps and timeframes, right? You want to get a clear path you want to get a clear path to not only getting a deal done, but getting your product implemented at your customers. If you don't, it's going to be really hard to navigate these org charts and figure out how to sell this. Right. And once you've obtained the buyer journey in great detail, you want to recruit all stakeholders to the next meeting so that they can be exposed to your value. So you can start building trust with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think so just to kind of close the question
Of course.
is what's happened is we're trying to build a volume, and this call we recently had was with a larger a company, you could say,
Yep.
versus ones we've already had traction with.
Mhm.
We had traction with, to your previous slides, that have been smaller within network, right? So now we're starting to deviate from network and kind of expanding.
Yep.
And this is kind of the first challenge that we've encountered. So I think your answer is very appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm going to get through these remaining slides and then I'll open it back up to questions. I'm more than I love this interactive stuff. Trust me, it's what I'd rather do that than even go through these slides. But I've got about 3 or 4 more of these. I want to make sure to get through them in the hour we have allotted because I think they're pretty important for everybody to be aware of. And I'll try to get through them really quickly. And then the rest of the time we can definitely devote to questions. This is a really important one. And this is why I want to get back to it. I can't tell you how many times I will ask founders, founders will come to me and say, oh, outbound doesn't work. We've tried it. I'm like, well, how many campaigns did you launch? And they'll say, well, we launched 7 or 8. We only got a couple replies. Right? That's not enough statistical significance to make a final determination on whether a particular initiative is successful or not. Right? I'll give you an example. Automated email outbound. Right? We had a client that came to us a few years ago. They had 13 big names signed up that all of us would recognize as big brands. I was really impressed. They came to us. Right? And they're like, here are our client list. And I was like, whoa, you guys have these 13 clients? They were like, yeah. And they said to us, but we still need to build out our top of funnel. Can you help us build our automated email initiative? And we said, sure. I told the CEO at the time, you've got to give this at least 4 months. And he said, yes. Right? We had some kind of verbal commitment that he was going to give this at least 4 months, which is really on the short end. Right? Typically, you're wanting to give this at the very least 6 months at a high degree of frequency. So we started launching these campaigns for this automated email initiative. In the first 40 campaigns we launched, 40, right? Over the span of a couple of months, this particular company only got 4 interested replies. Tough sledding, right? This particular CEO in our weekly update calls was getting impatient. I could feel his anxiety, right? I was even wondering, hey, is this guy going to pull the plug earlier? I got his commitment for 4 months, right? Those were the thoughts that were going on in my mind. It ended up that little by little, we got closer and closer to message market fit. About 3.5 months in, we were generating 18 interested replies a week, right? And that we turned a corner, right? We were starting to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars of pipeline on a weekly basis. But it takes a lot of iteration, and it takes a lot more iteration It takes a lot of data literacy. It takes a lot of copywriting skills, campaign design, et cetera, to get yourself to message market fit. And most founders don't know what that looks like, right? How hard it can be. And usually there isn't enough dopamine, right, for them to keep going. One of the mistakes I see founders make is a lack of sophistication when it comes to looking at the data and feedback that's coming back from the market. They'll look at a campaign and say, oh, it wasn't successful because I didn't get a reply. And I'll tell them, well, hold on. There's nothing you can salvage from this? What were your individual open rates? You mean there's no subject line that actually worked? How about the email body copy? Can we bring that in? Right? There's a lot of sophistication that goes in because a lot of these things is building upon strata, right? Time after time, picking the parts that actually worked, keeping those, getting very, very sophisticated about the data you see coming back from the market. Finding things you can salvage, even in campaigns that you think were not successful. And so one of the things we teach founders is not only the ability to read data and feedback coming back from the market, but also the ability to be less binary, to not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Right? So make sure you know what it can take to actually find message market fit when it comes to outbound. Just because you launched 7, 8, even 10, 15, 20 campaigns and didn't get that many replies doesn't mean you won't find message market fit. We talked about this a little bit earlier, right? There is anxiety inherent in having a product that doesn't fully meet your customer's need or needs, right? You're going to want your product, or your customers are asking your product with these number of features and functionalities, and you might be right here, and there may be a pretty big gap, right? And that may be causing you anxiety. I get it. I've been there. I felt the anxiety, right? But that anxiety is actually healthy, believe it or not, right? The fact that you've got the market pulling you in a particular direction and telling you where to go to find product market fit is actually really, really healthy. It's what I call market-led product development. I would much rather you guys be in that position where you're constantly getting market feedback and the market's telling you, hey, listen, if you develop feature A and feature B in the next 3 months, right, you will close the $275,000 worth of pipeline you currently have. I'd much rather you guys be in that position versus isolating yourselves in your product caves without market interactions for 6, 9, 12 months, only to come out with a product that when you try to go to market with it, nobody cares about. Right? Let the market pull you in the right direction. Even if things feel incomplete, even if you're embarrassed about your product, right? Reid Hoffman, the tech titan, right? The several-time founder and VC now. And you guys have heard his quote, if you're not embarrassed about the first version of your product, you're launching too late, right? Definitely a believer in that.
Also, Paul, there was one question in the chat. I know we are a bit past that, but if you could go back either now or later, if that works better, that would be lovely.
Yeah, sure. I'll get to it in just a couple of slides. I just want to get through these next couple, and I promise to get to it. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you.
This is something I preach about all the time, right? As founders, we tend to think, hey, I'm just going to demo my product, and people are going to want it, right? My product's so great. That's just not how sales works, right? What we need to do is to design a sales process that's going to optimize for our success, for our close rate, for our ability to generate revenue over time. And usually that's several steps. And there are a lot more things than just a product demo that need to be happening, right? We need to qualify. We need to conduct good discovery. We need to present commercials. We need to surface and handle objections. We need to obtain the verbal close. We need to control the sale, right? All those things need to happen in a sales process generally. And so when you have steps in your sales process, right, what can you do to prevent drop off, to prevent people ghosting you, right? What can you do to make sure that people continue along the track towards closing a deal? Well, one of the biggest things you can do is actually sell next steps. Right? How can you make the next step in your sales process sound so compelling, so value laden that your prospect has no choice but to attend it? right? How could you make it to sound like such must-see TV that they need to be there because they're going to benefit from it above and beyond your product? Just by being present on that call, they're going to learn something. It's going to be really important. It's going to help them get their promotion, right? What can you do in that next step, and how can you sell it in order to build connective tissue between the steps in your sales process, right? How can you build that bridge? Because if you don't, yeah, you might be able to book the next call, but generally you'll get a high no-show rate. People are like, why do I need to attend this? There's no value in it for me. And you get a lot of deals dropping off. You get deal stalling. Your sales cycles get to be too long. So one of the biggest things I teach my clients is to how to sell the next step. We've got a framework that is really, really powerful. And generally that increases their close rates. Deals don't drop off as much. It's a really, really important thing when it comes to sales. I can't emphasize it enough. This is the last one, and then we'll get to all of your questions, I promise. We are, as human beings, porous. Emotions that other people are going through will generally affect us, right? Empaths will generally be even more affected, right? I know because I am one, right? And it can be a beautiful way to live, but it could also, there are some downsides to it. And so what I want you guys to do is to realize that sales is a transfer of enthusiasm, right? And here's what I mean by that. We can sometimes, as founders, plod along in our demos, right? I want you to generate some enthusiasm to get folks excited about what you've built, right? Show your passion, show your personality, get people to like you, right? Be genuine with them. All those things are going to affect the way people feel about you and your products, and generally will increase your chances of closing deals. One of the things I also want you to do is to stay very tuned into your prospect, right? Because sometimes we don't. We're so caught up in our own spiel and the way we pitch our product and actually showing every bell and whistle of our product or service that we don't pick up on small cues or signals from our prospect. And what you have an opportunity to do is to pick up on your prospect's emotion and get them amplified and have it be a positive feedback loop, right? A virtuous cycle. If you sense that your prospect is getting enthused about a particular feature or functionality, get excited about it with them. Pick up on that excitement, right? And make sure that you're excited about it with them. There's a lot that can be done with transferring our enthusiasm to our prospects. And I want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. Sometimes we can get caught up in our heads pitching as opposed to being tuned into what's actually happening in the room. Okay. Questions, remaining questions. There was a question in the chat, Zoe, you said, which, let me see. I wasn't paying attention to the chat. Which are you?
So to rephrase what I said, you mentioned that you had one client that did 30 outbound emails or whatever. And you said that was not significant. They couldn't make a decision based off of that data, but I mean, mathematically, that is fairly significant. So what do you call significant as to the number of outbounds for what you call a campaign?
So what I would recommend is that you if you're doing automated email, that you send 4 to 6 100 lead campaigns out on a weekly basis that are all 4 steps deployed over 2 weeks or less. And you keep doing that for 6 months before you can actually pull the plug on it.
So let's take this one step further. So in my sector, there's 2,300 oil and gas companies that we can sell to globally.
Yep.
All right. We know their names. We know their phone numbers. We know their emails. Yep. All right. But if we were to do 100 of them every week for 6 months, we'd probably email them multiple times. And again, it would probably do more harm than good if we're not landing the mark. So when we do send an email, we need to make sure that, it hits home or at least isn't discreditable. Right. Yep. So what would you say on that?
What we didn't consider, Meet, here is that automated email is not the only possible go-to-market tactic.
Oh yeah, we're pretty manual about our outbound because it is such a narrow audience.
Yeah.
But
anything under 3,000 to 4,000 leads, you probably shouldn't automate.
Right.
We wouldn't even run into the problem that you're mentioning.
Yeah.
Right. You'd be doing what people call ABM, account-based marketing, personalized outbound, which is what I would do if I were you. And I'm happy to teach you how to do that in a very effective way. Because there are ways that personalize that generally resonate with people. And personalization, what it generally does, by the way, right? Why do we personalize messages to people or personalize parts of our sales process? We personalize because we gift our prospects the feeling of feeling understood. Hey, I get you, which is a basic human desire at the end of the day. And so what things can we do to make people feel understood so that they have a greater likelihood to respond to us? That's a central question we should be asking us when it comes to personalization.
Thank you, Paul.
No problem. Any other questions? And then I have an offer to put in front of you guys if you are open to it. That might be helpful.
Hi, Sharvik over here. Is it okay to ask a question?
Of course. Lay it on me.
Yeah, fantastic. So on your last slide, you talked about being enthusiastic with the buyer, right? And then getting onto their wavelength of enthusiasm. And this is a bit more of a nuanced question. What do you think is the fine line between over enthusiasm and under enthusiasm? Because there's as a salesperson myself, some reps can get over enthusiastic, and then the buyer goes, "Hey, you know what? That's a bit too much. Maybe I'm gonna look somewhere else." So, what would be the ideal fine line for that?
Great question. And I don't know that I have I've got a semblance of an answer, but I think it's a discussion we can have. But I think I would always over-index on being more enthusiastic than not.
Okay.
You bring up a great point, however, right? Because nobody wants to talk to a depressed person, right? And I know I'm exaggerating to make a point, but nobody wants to talk about somebody that's going to be depressed on the other end. That's not at all excited about what they built, or that doesn't sound excited about what they built. But I do agree with you that being overly enthusiastic can feel fake. I think that's the biggest thing to me, right? If your enthusiasm doesn't feel calibrated or feels fake or manufactured, right? That's where we kind of get turned off. But if somebody's enthusiasm is genuine, right, and it comes from the right place within you, then I think it's totally warranted.
Fantastic.
Right?
Yeah.
And so
it's very hard. It's a very hard line to walk. I think it's. I've asked myself this question many times, but I keep on going like, okay, it has to be genuine, but what seems genuine to you may not seem genuine to someone else, or people are so different in how they perceive a part of someone else, right? Anyways,
and by the way, this goes with messaging too, right? I may have a particular way of conveying my value prop that works really well with a particular vertical, right, or job title, and with another job title, I'll try the same thing, and they're like, it totally misses the mark.
Yeah,
I'm with you there. That's why sales and go-to-market is so complex.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for your question. Noor, go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, I have two questions. One of them is like, what's the most common signals that a product sounds sellable but isn't actually scalable?
Signals that are not scalable that makes it sound like the product is sellable?
I'm
So
confused.
the signals are not scalable, you're saying?
Yeah, how like the signals that make a product sound sellable, you can sell it, but actually isn't scalable.
The signals are not scalable, you're saying?
Yeah, like the product, you can sell it, but it's not really it can scale.
What can't scale? The signals or the product?
The product.
Okay. I mean, there's so many different signs that, a product is scalable. It's sellable. I'm gonna get it right this time. One of them is, one of the easiest ones is, hey, when you send an outbound email, for example, right, or you're sending a 100 lead campaign, are you getting a high interested rate? Is it above 1%? Right? If you get a 2% interested rate on a 4-step campaign that was deployed over 2 weeks or less, that's a pretty good sign that you've at least you've at least piqued some interest as to what your product is and how it might be able to solve one of the problems they're having. Right. So that's a kind of the tip of the spear, right? Go to market signal. They're like, whoa, okay, this product may be resonating with this part of the market, right? Maybe the market at large, but at least this part of the market. So that's a signal that's tip of the spear. Another signal that's more qualitative is if you're demoing your product and your prospects leaning in like this, and and that's just a visual cue, right? If the person's leaning in and asking you questions and how much does this cost and wow, and all these are qualitative signals when you're demoing that the person really wants to get their hands on this thing and that they're going to be benefiting from it.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, so it's really important. So this is one of the things I'll say, right? I think Zoe, I can go over for another half hour. I'm happy to stick around. I want to make sure. Are you okay with that, or did you want to? Because I just wanted to go over a quick thing and give my offer, but I can also adjourn.
I'm totally okay with that. For the founders,
Okay.
of course, feel free to drop off if you need to. Feel free to stay on, and then I think we can kind of see how many are looking to stay on. We can go over time, of course. Very happy to do that. I'm seeing a thumbs up, so let's definitely continue if that's okay with you, Paul. Also, sorry to jump in. For those that are leaving now, totally fine. Thank you so much for joining. I did put a link in the chat. I know everybody hates feedback forms. Nobody cares too much about filling them out, but they help us a lot planning these events in the future. So of course, now we can see that you all wanted to join. So hopefully you enjoyed it. So please let us know in these forms to kind of let us know what you want to see in the future in the upcoming Founders Lounges. But that's all I had to say. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Zoe. And by the way, I'm all for the feedback too, right? So if there's parts of this presentation or this talk or this interaction you didn't like, definitely let me know, because we're always trying to get better when it comes to our talks. Zoe, I may ask you the parts you're willing to share. I may ask you for the feedback, because I'm always looking for feedback for these things too. I wanted to say something dovetailing on what Nor asked. The founders that I generally find most successful go to market and sales are the ones that are hungry to get feedback from the market. One of the things I say to my founder clients is that the market is a much greater force than we will ever be. And just like a surfer reveres the ocean, right? Because a surfer can get plowed over by the ocean, right? Buried by the ocean. We should bow to the market, right? And revere it in our own way. And what I want you guys to be able to do over time is to be able to listen to what the market is telling you and know what to do with it, right? Have those insights, right? Have that feedback that's coming back to you qualitatively and quantitatively, right? Be able to listen to it, interpret it, and know what to do with it. That is one of the biggest skills I can teach founders and startup operators. And it's like teaching them how to fish, because there's a great likelihood that they won't go hungry after that, because they'll always know how to take the next step, however small, in improving their go-to-market motion or sales process. Any other questions? Brian.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for the talk. I have a question regarding literacy on understanding what kind of campaign data you get, right? So I understand that the dopamine hit is really not enough. After a while, you can only get so many no's before you want to hit yourself in the wall. But I think there's a good lesson to be learned on these failed campaigns on understanding what is working and what is not working. What are some of the metrics that you look for? Because at this point, sometimes we feel like it's kind of like if you train an AI model and you're having bad data, you keep having bad data and you're never gonna get the AI to a point where it's good. And that's why I want to ask, what is like a basic few metrics that you do for your for the campaigns that you run?
It's one of the smarter go-to-market questions I've heard in a long time, Brian. Thank you for asking. Yeah, it shows the level. You might not have all the inputs you want, but it shows the way your mind works when it comes to go-to-market and data, and I love it. Right, I just want to point that out.
Thank you.
Reflect that back at you. So there's some top level metrics which I can give you here, and then there's some more sophisticated ones which I can give you a little bit. We can right. This could be a long topic, but I at least want to partially address it. So let's talk about automated email, since you pointed out. And the beauty, there's several beauties about automated email. It's gotten tougher, right? I'll start by saying it's gotten a lot tougher over the last 10 or 15 years. When I started doing it, it was much easier than it is today. However, the people that are telling you that automated email is dead are doing all of us a great disservice. It's not dead. It's just harder you got to execute at a much higher level, right? And the main reason is spam filters have become a lot smarter. Right? You've got people like Google and Microsoft that have PhDs that are constantly devising smarter ways to keep spam out of our regular inboxes, right? And they're doing that with greater and greater efficiency. And it's our job. It's a little bit of like it's a coevolutionary arms race, right? They get better, so we need to get better. And it's this constant race. It's kind of like doping in sports, by the way. Just quick tangent, but it's a little bit like that too, right? The athletes are constantly getting better at finding masking agents that are undetectable, and then water and all these other are finding better ways to test. And so I'm sorry for going on the tangent. For automated email, Brian, right? For 4-step campaigns, here are some of the top level metrics that I look for, right? You're going to want to have a 5% bounce rate. Right? If you get closer to 10, you should really ring the alarm. That has a lot to do with your data quality and potentially even being bounced by spam filters. Second metric we look at is open rates. We want those to be between 40 and 60%. Right? And that's for the aggregate of the campaign, not just one step. So 40 and 60%. If you're doing better than 60%, more power to you. You're doing awesome. That has to do with your subject lines, right? And your ability to stay out of spam, right? So 40 to 60%. You want reply rates of 6%, again, aggregate for the whole campaign, right? And that's usually, if your emails are getting opened, that's usually a litmus test as to what kind of email body content you have, right? If people open your emails but are not responding to it, right? Are you not grabbing their attention at the beginning? Or do they stop reading it? Is it not engaging enough, right? What is happening there that's not engaging people? And then last but certainly not least is your interested rate, right? You want an what is short for interested reply rate of 1%, right? One of the surprises I get when I give people these stats in session, they're like, really, only? Like, yeah. I even wrote a blog post right in my Substack that says 1% is all you need. Right? Your interested rate is by far the most important metric when it comes to automated email outbound. All the other ones are in some way in service of that. If you hit 1%, you've got a successful campaign and you need to consider scaling up. And we can talk more about that, right? How you scale up, how you test campaigns, how you scale them up gradually, et cetera. But those are and I forgot, sorry, one more, Brian, for you. 2/3, you should want 2/3 of your interested replies to convert to calls booked. If you get below 50%, there's a real issue there on how you convert initial interest into book calls. Right? But interested rate is your number one metric because it is the purest way to judge, hey, is the message, right, that we're putting out there, is it compelling enough to our prospects? Are they, how are they responding with interest? Are they responding with interest? That's what we're looking at. And so, Brian, to answer, I'll give you one quick example as to the micro, like you were saying, hey, what if we looked at one campaign? What can I salvage? I'll give you one quick example, and I'll move over to Lucas. And I'm more than happy to talk more about it, by the way.
Thanks.
Free coaching session for anyone that was here today or anyone that's watching this recording, right? Just reach out to me via email to schedule. We can book it for the next several weeks, right? Just schedule permitting. More than happy to spend an hour with any one of you that wants this, right? The only thing I ask of you guys is to bring 2 to 3 thorny sales and go-to-market issues that you want to help on, and my job is going to be to help you through hopefully at least one of them, right? But it's a great way for us to continue working, and it's totally free to you guys, right? So Brian, having said that, you might say, well, Paul, how do this campaign didn't get any replies? What do I like? Well, one of the things you could look at is individually, what are these subject clients individually garnering you? Like, are there, like, for example, any step out of these 4 steps that would be over 25% open is considered really good, a really good subject line. It would be a subject line I would consider salvaging. I would not consider, I would actually salvage it for future campaigns. It's like, wow, this one got people to open. This is really cool. And one of the things I see, by the way, Brian, is that we don't generally, as founders, devote enough time and brain power to putting together crafty subject lines, right? Because we're like, oh, the email body copy, it just feels like it's really important. But you got to realize your subject line's your pickup line, right? You could be the most empathetic, loving person, amazing partner to somebody, right? To a potential mate. But if you don't get their attention, right, with a pickup line, it doesn't really matter, right? Same goes with your email body copy. You could have the most amazing email body copy crafted. If you don't get the person to actually open it, to click on it and open it, you got nothing.
That makes sense. Thanks.
No problem. Lucas, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Great. So I had a question to one of your previous responses that was towards the amount of lead that you wouldn't automate under, and you mentioned 4 to 6,000,
So I
which
said 3 to
seems
4,000. I think I said 3 to 4,000.
uh, well, still it's quite a volume to manage, especially if you're a small team that's also focused on building the product. So I just wanted to hear about your thoughts on, let's say let's go a bit back as a startup. You have an idea of a product. Obviously, where most of us are a bit further than that. You're talking to some clients and you're looking at actually scaling that up. So at which point would you automate which parts of the system, and how would keep your focus on the most important elements, and how would you build that system over time?
So your question is, how do I? You're saying that it's a large number of leads, and you're worried about how to scale it up.
Basically, yeah, if I have a list of multiple thousand people that I need to manage, myself without any automation, just to keep that this founder-led sales and that empathy and not
Yeah.
delegating anything, how do you actually manage it? Or which parts of it are best to automate? Which ones should you just really keep for yourself, especially in the beginning,
Yeah.
once you actually tone down on the process?
So let's talk about it. How big is the vertical you're targeting? How many leads?
But we're still working on lead generation, but obviously we can get to thousands.
Just 1,000?
No, thousands easily. So it's a $200 billion industry. So thousands of companies globally.
So there's probably tens of thousands?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so you should consider automating. There's not a problem with that, but I can show you how to scale it
And
up.
we are automating. It's just, obviously now there's a lot of experimentation with the sequences and gathering that data and so on. But I just want to ensure that I don't delegate too much over to a system or to someone else too early. That is why I'm curious about that
Well,
approach.
I wouldn't delegate it to somebody else too early. I would use a marketing automation tool that works really well, right? For that. The one we recommend, by the way, is Ample Market. Right? Wonderful. They're one of the most, and one of the reasons, there's several reasons we recommend them, right? One of them is that they're one of the most avant-garde, really cool tools that gather data, enable you to target hand raisers, leverage AI, et cetera. But one of the other reasons is they have a really clean lead database. So you can search from it and automatically get a bunch of leads. For you, it might be tens of thousands of leads, but they also have the marketing automation piece where you have sequences, right? That you can send out. And so, do you guys mind if I pull up my whiteboard for a second? Amy, I see you. Don't worry.
Just an additional question regarding to Lucas, what he said. But here, imagine that if you target it, for example, and you run a campaign for, let's say, 3,000 leads, and then you get over than 1% interested in, let's say, in in a quick time frame. So how we can manage this flow of to respond effectively to these customers. So or let's say to manage the time or the phases of running a campaign. So split it into different phases and see what happens. How to assess
I got you.
these
I
actions.
got you. Give me one sec. I'm just going to show you guys how to do this, right? So here's how we typically, here's the method behind the madness, right? I gave you guys the metrics. I'm happy to write them down again if you want here at some point, but for the sake of time, I'll start here. The way you want to build automated email campaigns, right, or an automated email initiative is as follows. We want to make sure not to waste, well, I got a little carried away there with my arrow. We want to make sure not to waste good leads with bad copy. And so we want to do, especially if we want to hit the 1% interested rate, is test copy and campaign design on the least amount of leads that is still statistically significant. And for us, that's 100 leads. Right? And what we typically encourage our clients to do is to send 4 to 6 100 lead campaigns out on a weekly basis if you want to take automated emails seriously. Right? These are test campaigns, these are different copy variations, etc. Only the ones that reach 1%, right, will we graduate up to the next level. So the ones that reach 1%, there might be a lot for weeks on end that don't reach the 1% interested rate. Right? And so for the ones that do, we're going to want to clone this campaign. We're going to want to put 200 leads in there and then relaunch it the following week. Right? At this point here, the law of large numbers may disprove the fact that it's actually scales. We may not get 2 interested replies, which would get us that 1% interested rate. We might get less than that. We might get 0. We might have gotten lucky here. And so in that particular instance, we can discard that campaign. Right? It hasn't graduated. If it reaches 1%, we're going to scale it up again. Right? And so we're going to, in this particular instance, the ones that do, we're going to clone it, put 4 leads in there, relaunch it the following week. If it reaches 1% at 400 leads, we're in a really good spot. Right? Because that's a campaign we can keep reusing week after week. We're in a beautiful place. Right? So much so that imagine us having 5 different campaigns, right, that all at 400 that have reached that 1% plateau, right, that we can keep relaunching week after week. That's us relaunching, right, us targeting 2,000 new leads a week, which at 1% is generating us 20 interested replies, which at 2/3 calls booked, right, from interested replies generates us 13 new intro calls booked on a weekly basis. Now we're cooking. And now we're benefiting from the scalability of automated email outbound. Does that make sense? Cool.
Thanks a lot.
No problem. My pleasure. Any other questions? You got me till the top of the hour if you guys have more questions. Pablo. We have the same name, but yours sounds better. Oh, Pablo disappeared.
Sorry, no. I was in mute.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Paul is great. I've been just nodding all along. All of the mistakes that I have made, and you actually removed the blind of my eyes a few times. So very, very much appreciate Zoe and the team putting this together. And I'm glad to be here. So definitely yes, following everything you've said, would you recommend the same sort of approach for, say, fundraising? Because we have 2 fronts here. One is the client and the traction side, and the other one is sort of the investors and the fundraisers. And then tool wise, I'm using Falk, if that's okay, or if you recommend something else.
Falk is what is it? A marketing automation tool?
So,
Is Falk a marketing automation tool?
Falk is CRM.
It's a CRM.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I actually spoke to one of their founders a little while ago. I'm remembering now. I think it's pretty good. I haven't really tested it, to be honest. The one I typically I haven't tested it enough to really have an educated opinion. I wish I did. They sounded like they were building something pretty useful. I recommend Close typically to my clients, right? Close is pretty cool for early stage startups. It's built around inside sales productivity. I think the most important thing with CRMs is that you're using them, you're entering a bunch of data in it, right? The data's clean because right, CRMs, you're going to be, well, I think about them in two major ways, right? When it comes to CRM use. One is making sure that it passes the hit by bus test. And here's what I mean by that, right? If we were working in the same organization, Pablo, and I were to be hit by a bus one day and I was managing a bunch of deals in pipeline, I would want there to be enough information in there for you to pick up on these deals and actually move them along and close a few of them while I was in the hospital recuperating, right? And so that's what you want. You want enough data in there to be able to do that. The other thing you want is you want the data to be really accurate and really good because as a management team, we're going to make decisions based on aggregate data and other things we're going to be looking at in the CRM. And so if you're, the people say this all the time, garbage in, garbage out. If the data is either incomplete or not good, we're going to be navigating in a fog as opposed to navigating with great clarity as a management team. And your CRM is all about that. So I would be as comprehensive, as accurate as possible when it comes to putting data in. It doesn't always happen with early stage startups, but the more you can get in the habit, the better. Just so you know, salespeople at mature organizations get fired for not entering in data properly in their CRMs, even if they're successful salespeople. That's how important it is. Right. So that was your CRM question. You were asking, like, what part of the method, what were you taught? I understand, by the way, fundraising is sales. You're absolutely right. So I'm not going to disagree with you there. It's certainly, and matter of fact, we just got brought on first time for us. A VC fund is raising their new fund when they're approaching a bunch of LPs. They just brought us on to help them with that fundraising process, right? Which might be different from yours. But we're helping them close their fund, which I think they'll close anyway, but in a much shorter amount of time because that's kind of my mandate with them. So totally agree. What are you asking specifically about the fundraising piece?
So basically, the fundraising, warm introduction, this tier or the kind of there's very good sort of into someone, which is a warm introduction. So say for example, an existing investor picks up the phone, speaks to an investor at another firm, then that's a very good one. And then there's lesser and lesser and lesser to kind of a cold outreach on LinkedIn, like a message on LinkedIn to connect to someone. So, when you reach out to someone and you resend sort of, say you send an opener and then a chaser, for 5 days later, and then, another one, and there has been clicks open, there haven't been any replies. If you sent, one pager, that they click open that one pager and everything, but there isn't any reply.
Yeah.
So how do you, because if I try to put myself on their shoes, and if I'm here and I'm getting bombarded by the same guy all the time, number one, he's telling me he's not being able to do what he wants to do. Therefore, I become less interested in actually connecting to that guy. Right? It goes the opposite effect. But there has to be a way of resuscitating or to have the right approach on that case, and I'd be interested to hear from you any tips.
So, great question, and you have a pretty darn good understanding of all the fundraising dynamics, which I love that. There's several things I would consider. One of the things I would consider is how do I add the value and insights at every sales interaction, right? You said you sent a one pager or you sent an executive summary or maybe a blurb about your company. What else can you do that might be helpful that they might benefit from? Is it an article? Is there something about VC trends, that may be relevant to them? Is there anything else you can help with by putting yourself in their shoes? That's one bucket and one thing you may want to consider. Another thing you may want to consider is if you're showing, continuing to give investors data points that you're headed up and to the right, whether that's traction metrics like revenue, for example, revenue growth and accelerated revenue growth, or also the fact that your round is getting filled up, right? You're getting traction with investors too. That matters too. Hey, listen, last time I sent you an email, we had these are I'm going to give abstract numbers that are maybe not totally relevant to you. Last time I sent you an email, out of the $1.5 million seed round we were trying to raise, we only had $700,000 worth of commits. That was 2 weeks ago. Now we're at 1.2. I thought you might want to know that because we're getting close to having it completed. I want to save you an allocation, right? You're in that messaging, you're both saying, hey, I'm catering to you, but you're also saying, hey, this thing may, there's a limited time, right? You're creating some urgency to act. All those things are worth considering, right? VCs are very influenced by traction, and they're very influenced by other investors moving on particular things. René Girard, the famous French, philosopher you guys have probably heard of, talks about mimetic desire, right? And that being such a powerful force with human beings. It's the fact that we want things that other people want. VCs behave like that so much, right? Almost to a fault. Like sometimes it drives me crazy, to be honest, right? When I was fundraising, it drives me crazy. But it's worth considering, and it could be an incredibly powerful force. So I would think about those two things when it comes to reaching back out to folks.
Thanks very much. Very helpful.
My pleasure. Penny.
Hi. So thank you very much, Paul and Zoe. This is very insightful. So my problem is a bit more unique. When AgriFintech, we use rapid adoption to go to market. That means that we are B2B. However, we have a large number of farmers on our system. That the data is all we sell to be financial aggregators, to have all other ecosystem players come in to pay subscription. So now we are going to hit like 1 million farmers. We got a contract to go to 15 countries. However, we can automate the process for sales, but then how do you go beyond that to automate the process to ensure that you activate the users to stay in the system, to continue to use the feature so that they pay subscription as you're still doing lead generation? Because ours is, we have the retail, which is huge number, and then we have the pure B2B that we have to engage, like development partners and government. So how much time should we be spending to retain the clients that we have? Because that's becoming a challenge for us.
I get it. So Penny, please trust me on this. I'm not skirting your question, right?
Yes.
And I'll give you a few tidbits, but I also want to acknowledge that this question's a large one, right? And it deserves a lot of attention. So one of the things I would encourage you to do is take me up on that free coaching session, right? That free sales consultation, because that would give us some time. Now I'll give you a few things I would consider, right? That I would start thinking about without knowing your whole situation. Because one of the things I would love to do is to start digging into your particular situation so I can be even more insightful. I don't know what your situation is, but I tell this to founders all the time. I tell them usually to hire a CS person, a success person, before they hire a salesperson, right? Especially if you're dealing with a SaaS or a subscription business. It's very important for us to be able to mitigate churn before we, right? You can't really build you can't benefit from the compounding effects of subscription and retention, et cetera, if you don't mitigate churn, if you don't increase LTV, if you're not keeping people on your sauce, so to speak, and keep people retained. So one of the things you may want to consider if you're overwhelmed is maybe, and if you can afford it, is maybe bringing on a person that's going to be dedicated to CS.
Okay,
right?
that's a good idea.
Really close to customers, right?
Okay.
So that you can devote yourself, or maybe yourselves, right, with your co-founders or your founding team to go to market and sales.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'm booking the call, definitely, and I think this was that ample time for us, right time, because we are scaling very fast, and definitely churn is an issue, especially if you've closed and you have the leads. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, and kudos to you for being in that place. Very, I know you know this. I know you're probably not where you want to be at the end of the day, but kudos to you for getting where you are, because a lot of startups don't get to where you currently are, and it's exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. As you mentioned, our hour and a half even now is over. So I say let's wrap it up. Again, you mentioned an hour free coaching for everybody. Super awesome offer. Thank you very much for that. Guys, we're happy to share the link with you afterwards as well. We'll send an email in the next days with a recording, with a link, just to have for you to have everything in place. Again, if you need anything, reach out to us via alumni@startupbootcamp.org. I believe you have our phone numbers, our emails, all of that. So as always, of course, happy to help out where we can. You know how to reach us. If there's nothing else, I say, Paul, if that's all right with you, let's close the call, and then people can connect with you or with us, and then we'll be happy to connect them via us with you afterwards.
I really appreciate you guys having me. This was a lot of fun. I'd welcome the opportunity to do another one or other ones with you guys, Zoe, just so you know. I hope this was helpful for everybody. And yeah, thank you again for having me.
Cool. Thank you as well, Paul. Very much appreciate you. Everybody have a lovely rest of your day. A great start into your day, whatever time zone you're in. Thanks all for joining and for staying on over time. So we will see you guys very soon. As mentioned, yes, we will share the recording, and yes, there will be more of these sessions. Please let us know in the feedback form what you'd like to see more of.
Thank you.
Cool. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.